Another massive cyclone barrels towards Mozambique, only 6 weeks after Cyclone Idai killed hundreds in East Africa. A closer look at the Zimbabwe Wildlife Orphanage that rescues animals and educates against poaching. And Malawi rolls out Africa's first malaria vaccine for children. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. The outer edges of Cyclone Kenneth is beginning to batter southern Tanzania and northern Mozambique on Thursday, with sustained violent winds of up to 145 kilometers per hour, according to the Weather Channel. The South African Weather Service told Reuters that Kenneth may strengthen before the entire storm makes landfall in Mozambique and could bring 7 to 9 meter waves and a 3-meter storm surge. The powerful storm has already pounded the French Indian Ocean island of Mayotte, where downpours and strong winds pulled down trees and sent the most vulnerable residents fleeing to shelter in local schools. Authorities in Mozambique warned that close to 700,000 people could be affected. Viewers Laditza Hoke has more.
Tropical cyclone Kenneth swept over the Comoros Islands off Africa's east coast on Wednesday, with downpours of rain and violent winds gusting up to 200 kilometers an hour. The impoverished residents of the French-governed island of Mayotte fled their rickety homes to seek shelter in schools.
Here, we are dealing with an extremely underprivileged population that mostly comes from the shanty towns around Kungu and who built grounds that aren't very stable. Their houses are made out of sheet metal that is not exactly strong or very well secured.
The storm is expected to strengthen as it heads toward the East African coast near the border between Mozambique and Tanzania. Mozambique's National Institute of Disaster Management warned Wednesday that more than 682,000 people could be at risk from the storm in the northern Cabo Delgado and Niassa provinces, with about 112,000 people in the direct path of powerful winds. Kenneth comes as Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe struggle to recover from last month's disastrous cyclone Idai. That storm made landfall on March 15th at Mozambique's port city of Beira and quickly spread floods through the region, washing away 700,000 hectares of spring crops and creating food and clean water shortages. The United Nations World Food Programme has provided food assistance, but there is need for more.
We've managed up until today to reach 1 million people. So that's a great achievement for us.
The UN agency is still using helicopters to dispatch food to people in remote areas.
We are living with what we have been given: rice, beans, oil, seeds. We built a new small house with the iron sheets from our old roof. It doesn't stop here. We cannot stop because assistance is not forever. We have taken our hose and returned to the fields.
The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization has been distributing corn, beans, and vegetable seeds, as well as tools to small farming households in central Mozambique.
Planting for second harvest in October, November must be done in the coming days. It's very important that the farmer do that now.
Cyclone Kenneth appears to be weaker than Idai, but it remains dangerous, especially for the most impoverished communities in northern Mozambique. UN officials say the new storm may slow down the recovery from Idai, whose massive floods left about 1,000 people dead or missing and devastated the region not accustomed to such violent storms. Zlarica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Almost 70 people have been killed in South Africa following torrential rains along the eastern coast, according to Lennox Mabaso, a spokesman for the Provincial Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Department. Throughout Thursday, rescuers have been working to recover bodies in KwaZulu-Natal province. Most of the deaths occurred after the downpours triggered flooding and mudslides. The region has heavy rain every year, but they rarely kill so many people in such a short space of time. Maboso attributes the severity of the storm and its impact on the population to climate change. One witness saw rescuers collect the body of a woman who had been dug out of the mud by locals. Maboso also says a more precise death toll is expected later on Thursday. Other witness accounts record flood waters and mudslides crashing through houses, many with people inside, and destroyed roads and other infrastructure. Researchers in Britain say that even moderate storms can move large boulders weighing as much as 10 metric tons. Researchers also warn that even large natural barriers may not offer much defense. Here's viewers Arasha Rabasani.
Along the coastline of the Isle of Wight, new research shows that even nature's defenses may not protect against her wrath.
This is a natural defence, if you like, to the land that lies behind it. And as this area erodes with the removal of these large blocks, that also then increases potentially the hazards that will be impacted on the land behind us here.
For the past 3 years, researchers at the University of Portsmouth in England tracked boulder movement using radio technology they embedded into more than 100 stones. They say the results were surprising.
As an example, we've got this really large boulder, 10-ton boulder, probably the weight of 4 or 5 family cars, that has been moved some 10 metres from the edge of the shore platform there, which is quite remarkable, really, when you consider the wave climate here being relatively sheltered. We're still seeing the movement of really large stuff, perhaps more so than we're seeing the smaller stuff move.
Researchers say their work is more than just boulders on the beach. Their findings may shine an ominous light on the future of the world's coastal communities.
We see, obviously, with the onset of climate change, we're going to see bigger storms, more frequent storms, and ultimately there'll be more damage as a result of that. And so if we have a better understanding of how our coastlines are responding to present-day storm activity, we can get a better idea of what we anticipate might happen in the future.
Portsmouth's research team says their findings show an increase to potential hazards in coastal communities. They say erosion at the coast threatens the land behind it, which may support infrastructure for schools, roads, businesses, and homes. Arashi Arbasadi, VOA News, Washington.
Well, now to North Africa, where Libyan officials running a migrant detention center in the eastern town of Tajura said Wednesday there are not enough supplies for the hundreds of migrants taking refuge there. The announcement comes as Italy urges the European Union to prepare a plan of action to deal with the possible flight of refugees from the conflict in Libya. Some 550 migrants, mainly from sub-Saharan African origins, were living in the warehouse. However, according to the center's director, there was not enough food. More than 3,600 jailed migrants have been trapped in Tripoli since the Libyan National Army started an advance to seize the city of 2.5 million people.
I'm scared of being caught in the war. I hear gunfire every day, night and day, all day. I hear gunfire in all directions. I'm scared. We have problems here every day. I just hope that nothing bad happens to us and that they will move us from here so nothing bad happens to us. This is all I wish for.
Well, Libya has been rather mired in chaos since former dictator Muammar Gaddafi was toppled in 2011 with Western intervention. Now, this latest flare-up threatens to disrupt oil production and leave a power vacuum that Islamist militants could exploit. Not too far from there, Sudan's opposition and ruling Transitional Military Council have agreed to form a committee to resolve their disagreements. Meanwhile, tensions are rising over how long it will take to transition to civilian rule after former autocrat Omar al-Bashir was ousted in a coup. The ruling military council and the opposition umbrella group of the Declaration of Freedom and Change have appeared on a coalition course in recent days over popular demands for a more democratic civilian government. Now, the opposition movement, which includes protest organizers, the Sudanese Professionals Association, said it would meet with the nation's military leaders and listen with an open mind.
We are partners and we are working together to bring this country towards the shore of peace. And our goal is to place peaceful foundations for the building of Sudan.
The common responsibility between the Freedom and Change Forces and the Military Council has been emphasized, as well as the leadership provided by the Freedom and Change Forces towards the revolutionary movement. The fruitful role of the armed forces towards protecting the people has also been emphasized. It has also been agreed that a joint council is to be formed to discuss the transitional arrangements and the legitimacy of different frameworks and units.
Well, the opposition has insisted on a swift handover of power to civilians, but the Transitional Military Council says the process could take up to 2 years. Now, Zimbabwean Animal Orphanage is one of the organizations leading the effort to ensure poaching and other factors do not destroy wildlife in the southern African nation. Columbus Mavunga reports from near Zimbabwe's second largest city, Bulawayo.
About half an hour drive southeast of Bulawayo is a special orphanage caring for the abandoned and injured offspring of local animals. The Chipangali Wildlife Orphanage is home to 25 species, some endangered, some rescued from poachers. The Wilson family established the orphanage in 1973, and a second generation now runs it.
If we can release them back into the wild, then that's actually first prize. Some other birds will fly into power lines and then they're missing a portion of their wing and they won't be able to be released. We also get baby animals. Now sometimes if they are reared, they get too tame and then they would just think that every human is friendly. Unfortunately, that's not the case. If we did release them, they'd probably get eaten by people, and that's a problem.
The orphanage's oldest resident is a crocodile rescued 4 decades ago from a community angry as it was eating their livestock. It was made part of the education program for visitors. So are these fetuses removed from animals that died in poacher snares.
This is a little baby elephant and it was probably only in the mom's stomach for a month. We obviously are trying to educate mainly locals, but anyone who comes to visit us here at Chipangali, into the importance of Zimbabwe's wildlife heritage. Because, without our wild animals here, there's lots of things like tourists wouldn't come and visit Zimbabwe. So we actually are trying to tell people to look after animals so that we can keep the tourists coming in.
Poaching for game meat, elephant ivory and rhino horns is a serious problem in Zimbabwe and other parts of Africa. But Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife Management says poaching is on the decline, partly thanks to groups like Chipangali.
The wildlife orphanage concept is very important in our management of wildlife. Especially we take normally orphanage animals, lonely bulls, so that we rehabilitate them and put them into society. It helps to maintain the family unity of our elephants especially. And it also helps to protect them from poachers, because we also do a lot of joint patrols with our neighboring countries, supporters, and also non-governmental organizations who are working with us to ensure that we protect our rich heritage.
Since its creation, Chipangali Wildlife Orphanage has rescued and released numerous animals into the nearby Matopo National Park. They include several troops of velvet monkeys and baboons, more than 30 pangolins, 5 leopards, 20 cheetahs, and various antelopes, small carnivores, and birds of prey. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Bulawayo, Zimbabwe.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Still ahead on Africa 54, a first for Africa in the fight against malaria. But first, a look at Thursday's headlines. Hello, I'm Vincent Makori, inviting you to the new look Africa 54, premiering soon. Same great team, but with new energy and a new host, Esther Gibuyi-Ewart.
Hi, and welcome. We'll bring you a closer look at politics, technology, health, and so much more, backed by VOA correspondents across Africa and the world, including perspectives from Washington, D.C. and Africans achieving abroad.
Same time, same channels.
Stay tuned.
And it's time for a health report. And joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with new details in the fight against malaria. Lino.
Malawi has launched the pilot phase of Africa's first ever malaria vaccine. The World Health Organization chose Malawi alongside Ghana and Kenya because of the high numbers of malaria cases and treatment facilities. The pilot phase aims to vaccinate 360,000 children per year, 120,000 of them in Malawi. But as Lamek Masina reports from Lilongwe, while the vaccine is expected to save thousands of lives, its effectiveness is limited.
Malawi this week launched Africa's first World Health Organization approved malaria vaccine at Likun Hospital. It took more than 30 years to develop a vaccine against malaria, a mosquito spread parasite that kills over 430,000 people per year, most of them African children. The vaccine, known as RTSS, is only helping children under 2 years of age who receive 4 doses at months 5, 6, 7, and 22.
After we did clinical trials, we had several age groups that we looked at. This vaccine was seen to be very, very effective in children aged between 5 months and 22 months. In other age groups, it didn't really show usefulness.
Malawi's mothers are excited about the potential of the malaria vaccine.
Malaria is a deadly and killer disease, not only to children, but to us adults as well. Although I have other children who are not vaccinated, I feel lucky to have this one protected from malaria.
But the vaccine is only effective in 40% of cases.
This new vaccine is just an additional tool to the control and elimination of malaria in this country. So whoever will get this vaccine, or all the children that will get the vaccine, we encourage them to still use other malaria prevention methods, like sleeping under mosquito nets, getting to the hospital quickly when they have fevers or they have body aches.
Despite its partial protection from malaria, in Malawi, the vaccine is expected to make a huge impact.
This vaccine has a potential of preventing 1 million cases. And at the moment, we experience 6 million cases.
Like many in Africa, Malawi's health care is overrun with malaria cases, which make up to 40% of hospital admissions and 30% of outpatient visits. Most of them are children under 5 years of age. Lamek Masina for VOA News, Lilongwe.
April 25th is World Malaria Day, observed worldwide to recognize and celebrate global efforts to control and eliminate malaria. The World Health Organization says in 2017, there were an estimated 219 million cases of malaria. About 435,000 people died in sub-Saharan Africa. Most were children under age 5. The theme for World Malaria Day this year is Zero Malaria Starts With Me. Malaria is a life-threatening disease caused by parasites that are transmitted to people through the bites of infected female Anopheles mosquitoes. Observers say progress has been made for the past decade in the fight against malaria, but this progress has plateaued since 2015. They say World Malaria Day marks an opportunity to engage with civil society, private sector, academic institutions, and global leaders in ramping up and fighting to eradicate the life-threatening disease entirely. Now joining me in the studio for more on the global fight against malaria is Dr. Lawrence Bahat, Senior Technical Advisor for the President's Malaria Initiative, PMI. Dr. Barat, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So the theme this year is Zero Malaria Starts With Me. Is this a call to action for individuals to take ownership of this fight against malaria?
It's a call to action for everybody. It's people, governments, private sector, civil society, researchers, academics, host country governments, as well as donor governments. So everybody has a role to play. Even people here in the United States where we're sitting can have a role to play in fighting malaria.
And speaking of people in the United States, the President Malaria Initiative that was initiated by President George W. Bush in 2005 is the organization that you are speaking on behalf of. Talk to us about what kind of impact have been seen, have been observed since this initiative was put together.
Yeah. Sure. When I started working in malaria about 25 years ago, more than 1 million children died every year from malaria, most in sub-Saharan Africa. And there were about 300 to 500 million cases worldwide. We've seen both deaths drop by 60% globally in that period, and cases drop, as you say, to about half of what they were. And that's from the success of all partners, including the President's Malaria Initiative, the Global Fund, and most importantly, the countries, the people, the partners working in countries to fight malaria.
However, in 2017, 219 million people were infected. That's a lot of people still. So what type of challenges are still out there when we know that we have the tools, we know what needs to be done?
Well, we have a package of effective tools. Unlike some diseases like measles, we don't have just one tool, a vaccine. And we've seen a vaccine, but as the person said, it's part of a package of tools that include things to fight the mosquito, like insecticide-treated bed nest and house spraying, but also treating cases of malaria and also using drugs to prevent malaria. So
what are the challenges then?
The challenges include just not being able to reach the people who are most at risk is one of the big challenges. Malaria is a disease of rural areas. It's a disease of the poor. It's a disease of people who have the least access to health care and the least access to preventive services. So reaching those groups. So
how do we do that? How do we reach them?
I think by mobilizing communities, by pushing health systems out. So a lot of our services are built on community health workers who can actually diagnose and treat malaria. It's about using tools that are easy to use in a very resource-limited setting, like a bed net or like a rapid diagnostic test that can be done by a community health worker under a tree.
Okay. And then before we wrap, PMI's 5-year strategy ends in 2020. What are the strategic priorities until next year?
Well, I think it's continuing to scale up the interventions and trying to reach more people. It's supporting innovations and new tools. It's helping to build the health systems and the information systems in countries that will support that program, not just malaria, but all health programs. And also fighting resistance to both the drugs and insecticides which we're facing. Particularly in Africa, insecticide resistance is a big challenge going forward.
And you've been working quite a bit on the continent of Africa.
Yes. I've been to more than 2/3 of the countries in Africa over my career. It's been a pleasure working on it.
Great, Dr. Barat. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
All right, and that was Dr. Lawrence Barat. He's Senior Technical Advisor for the President's Malaria Initiative. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter @LenorMoudou. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thanks a lot, Lino. Now be sure to watch Lino Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. The United States has announced that it is stopping exemptions given to 5 countries who continue to buy Iranian oil. U.S. officials say those nations must stop purchases by May 1st or face sanctions. China, the top buyer of Iranian oil, and Iran's neighbor, Turkey, are resolutely opposing the move, putting the Trump administration's approach of using sanctions to force foreign policy changes to the test. VOA White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara reports.
A strike at Tehran's lifeline as the United States moves to end Iran's oil export. Earlier this week, the Trump administration announced it will stop giving waivers to China, India, Japan, South Korea, and Turkey, countries that continue to buy Iranian oil after Washington pulled out of the 2015 nuclear deal with Tehran last May and reinstated sanctions. If they do not comply, they too may face U.S. sanctions.
Any nation or entity interacting with Iran should do its diligence and err on the side of caution. The risks are simply not going to be worth the benefits.
In dealing with adversaries, the Trump administration often turns to unilateral sanctions rather than build coalitions to pressure a target country to change its behavior, say some analysts.
It will not make things better, it will make them worse. It will alienate the 5 countries that are involved.
China buys about half of Iran's oil and resolutely opposes the move.
The cooperation between China and Iran is open, transparent, reasonable, and legitimate, which thus deserves respect.
Iran's neighbor Turkey also denounced the move.
Politically, it is not right. Ethically, it is not right. In terms of commerce, it is definitely not right.
India, the second largest buyer, has signaled it will comply. But in the past, they have bypassed sanctions using a payment system based on the rupee instead of US dollars. Countries which are not complying can choose to negotiate, retaliate, or, since transactions are made by private companies, they could also cheat.
It will be hard for the U.S. administration to take action against private tankers that are owned by private companies that are foreign flagged. It'll cause diplomatic issues if they attempt to do that.
On Tuesday, oil prices hit a 6-month high, following signals from Gulf OPEC members that they will raise output to offset oil shortfalls only if there is enough demand.
The Saudis have not come out and really put out a strong message that they would help replace any barrels that are lost in the process of ending the Iranian waiver program.
Iran has threatened to retaliate by blocking the Strait of Hormuz. The United States has said it would stop any Iranian attempt to block the waterway, which carries a fifth of the world's oil trade. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
Well, now here's what's trending. A new virtual reality experience in Sweden is allowing fans to see sports through the eyes of athletes with visual impairments. Now, the simulator allows fans to experience the difficulty of playing football with different visual impairments, such as albinism and glaucoma. With their vision patchy blood and at times totally non-existent, those taking part learn to trust their other senses as they try to score in a soccer goal. Now, staying in Sweden, a grassroots craze is helping to clean up the environment and keep people fit. Plogging combines jogging with picking up trash. From its humble beginnings in the Swedish ski resort of Ari, it is now spreading worldwide with participants from as far away as India and Mexico. The word plogging is a mix of jogging and plocka up, which means picking up in Swedish. Trail runners gathering to test out plogging on a sunny evening this week in Stockholm found it a rewarding experience as they jumped off the beaten track to collect trash before dumping it in rubbish bins near their starting point. And that's our show for today. Thanks a lot for watching and have a good night.